Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Pause for the Truth, where we are going to tell you what is really going on as it relates to high blood pressure, also known as the silent killer. It is so common in many communities and many families, and hopefully tonight we'll be able to dispel some myths and help you get better control of I almost said diabetes, Dr. Foy and Dr. Kane and Linda, of your high blood pressure. But of course, I am not co-hosting this show. You can't co-host the show by yourself. So joining me as usual is Dr. Rogers Kane. How are you doing this evening, Dr. Kane?
I'm doing absolutely fine because co-host without a co-host would be an oxymoron, which if you take out the oxy, that would be me. So,
Oh, well, thank you, Dr. Kane. I know you already shared that it's been a long, busy day for you. And, when a primary care physician says it's been a long, busy day, that sounds like there's been far too many sick people and or people who are not managing their blood pressure, their cholesterol, their blood sugar, on and on and on. But hopefully we'll shed some light on at least your blood pressure. Joining us this evening are two familiar faces who've been on the podcast before. And apparently they have awesome stuff to share because they were the first people we thought of when we talked about tonight's topic, who we wanted to have as our guest. And I would like to reintroduce to some who've not met Miss Linda Lockett Brown, one of Northeast Florida's favorite registered dietitians. How are you doing, Linda?
Doing fine. Glad to be here.
And thank you so much as always. When I poor Linda and even with Dr. Foy, when they get a text from us, they're like, "Oh Lord, what does she want now?" So thank you for always answering my text message. And of course, I think everybody around Northeast Florida knows our next guest, which is Dr. Trishella Johnson Foy, because she is the face. I see her on a Baptist commercial, the Get Your Flu Shot commercial, this commercial. So she is a popular physician here in the area. How are you doing tonight, Dr. Foy?
I'm blessed. Thank you. Thank you for having me back. I'm looking forward to this awesome discussion about high blood pressure.
well, let me say one of my favorite physicians as well.
Okay, well, the feeling's mutual. So,
And I like to give a shout out every now and then because we don't mention it often enough, and that is the Northeast Florida Medical Society. Northeast Florida Medical Society is a group of physicians that I've had the pleasure of working with over the past several years, and they are the Black physicians in the area. And I'm going to try not to butcher it, Dr. Kane or Dr. Ford. They are affiliated with the National Medical Association and the Florida State Medical Association. So for those of you aspiring young people, as we celebrate graduations this week, as you aspire to be a physician, if you are an African American young person who wants to be a physician, connect with the Northeast Florida Medical Society, where the current president is Dr. Kelly Tice. And but if you just Google Northeast Florida Medical Society, they've been doing some good things in the community. Dr. Foy and Dr. Kane have both, answered the call when I've called over the years and say, "Hey, can you come speak to a group and whatever?" Doing a lot of community service. So that's my kudos and shout out to the medical society tonight.
Let
But
me,
let's
let,
go ahead.
let me jump on that real quick, and that is to say that Dr. Foy has really stepped up to the plate whenever we ask her to do so. The Northeast Florida Medical Society, as you say, is a branch of the National Medical Association as well as the Florida State Medical Association, and which were created, just to explain it, which were created when we could not join the American Medical Association. And so we are very, very proud to have members like Dr. Foy, Johnson Foy, to be part of our organization, that give their time, their expertise, and because we recognize that it take away from their family and family obligations. So we're very, very thankful that they do so, and we recognize also that the community just does not realize the contributions that they have to our community. So thank you again, Dr. Foy, and then I'll shut up and let you guys go for
Hey,
it.
what? No, I'm teasing. So tonight we're going to talk about a serious subject, and it is a serious subject that unfortunately some people don't take too lightly. I've always shared with people during my experience as a health educator while working in public health that almost 4 decades, OMG, almost 4 decades as a health education consultant. I've always shared with people that just because you get a diagnosis doesn't mean that you can't take control of it. As a matter of fact, to back it up even further, once we find out what our family history is, then let's start being proactive. And even if you don't have a family history, it's also good to be proactive and just take care of yourselves. Right, Dr. Foy? And Dr. Foy, I'm not gonna get personal tonight. I promise I'm not gonna get personal. It's not gonna be about Jocelyn tonight. Dr. King doesn't believe me. But let's first start talking about what is high blood pressure and what causes it.
So high blood pressure is the pressure that it takes for your heart to pump blood to the rest of your body. And so when that level gets too high, that's when it's called hypertension or high blood pressure. So we measure it when we put the blood pressure cuff on your arm. It's telling us exactly what amount of force it's taking to push that blood forward. So when you have a number that is higher than definitely, well, we have changed the numbers quite a few times over the years. And so we go back and forth. So when people think of an elevation in their blood pressure, that number that's greater than 120 over 80 tends to be what comes up. But we call stage 1 hypertension is when you have a number with that top number, which is your systolic pressure. That's the pressure that it takes to pump blood forward, is greater than 130. And then if the bottom number, which is called the diastolic, which is the amount of pressure it takes to fill up the heart, gets greater than 90. So that's stage 1 hypertension. So when you those numbers get higher, then you go to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and that is what high blood pressure is. So keeping that number less than definitely the 130 over 90 is what we try to do. Ideally, though, believe it or not, we've said 120 over 80 for years, but a better blood pressure is when it gets to 115 for the top and less than 75 for the bottom, because any numbers above that starts affecting your heart and causing damage to your organs and to your blood vessels. And that's why we want this number to be lower. Some people are so used to their blood pressure being high when they see a number like 113, they're like, oh my God, my pressure is too low. And I'm like, no, that's actually just a good blood pressure, and that's where you should be. So we don't
matter with your age, though, Dr. Foy, in terms of being a younger or older person.
Yes, ma'am. So yes, it has been broken up several times into different categories of how do we decide what's right blood pressure for a person, whether they have heart disease, whether they have kidney disease, and their age. And so when we are looking at the age greater than 75, then the idea is we don't want it to drop too low. And so keeping it above 140 over 90 is definitely that high range, but 150 has been said to be reasonable in people as they get older. So it's really about weighing the risk and the benefits of dropping it too low, causing the pressure to drop down to where they may feel dizzy or pass out. And so that's why we look at these different ranges and numbers when it comes to the different ages of patients with hypertension.
So does family history of high blood pressure means that I'm probably going to get high blood pressure?
So if you have family history of things, then it puts you at higher risk. But you control a great part of your destiny by how you live. And so it becomes extremely important to try to live a life to prevent these things. These things are often preventable. Now, more than family history, age, as you get older, plays a big role in developing high blood pressure, because what it's about is again, as you get older, you know how, let's say if you have the pipes in your house, they get a little rusty as they get older. Well, the pipes inside your body get a little stiffer. And so because they get a little stiffer, it takes more pressure for the heart to push blood against them. And that's why as you get older, those numbers tend to get higher on the top. The bottom number, it actually gets a little lower as you get older because of that same stiffness. Because now it doesn't take as much pressure to fill up the heart because the heart is a little bit stiff. So we don't necessarily want that because it can lead to different types of heart failure. And that'll be a whole nother topic for us one day when we pause for the truth and talk about heart failure. But those are the things that getting older plays a role. But just because you have family history, you have a lot of control in what leads up to that, how soon you might develop it, if based on how you eat, how you exercise, those lifestyle things that you can do ahead of time to prevent it.
I'm glad you gave us the cue to how you eat, because we're going to bring Linda in now, because if folks don't know who Linda is, Linda has been a professor. I say has been because I don't know anymore. I haven't asked her all her business lately, but she has her own practice where she sees patients who need that extra help in managing their food. But also she's been a professor at UNF, so she is real knowledgeable in the area of food. Linda, I know a lot of people who have high blood pressure are told to watch their sodium intake or salt intake. Tell me about that. And Linda, I'm sorry, I just have to tell you, salt just seems like it's in everything. By God, how can I lower my salt intake?
And you're right, it is in everything. When we talk about salt and sodium, the way you can think of it is wherever sodium goes, water follows. So if you eat a lot of sodium, then the water, more of it, fluid, is going to go into your bloodstream and your blood pressure is going to rise. So it's just a mathematical kind of thing and a tendency sort of thing. But here's the other part. People of African descent are more sensitive to sodium than other people. So one ethnicity may, in fact, if you think about Asians eat high sodium foods. They don't struggle with blood pressure the way that people of African descent do. So the other thing is people know about it for themselves as an adult, but they don't think about it for their children. So if, like we were talking about family history, if you have a family history of high blood pressure, you are at risk, your children are at risk. And I've actually had 12, 14, 16-year-old patients that are hypertensive. Now, they're generally hypertensive because they weigh 200 pounds, but it does happen. And the scariest thing about that is the earlier that occurs, it decreases the lifespan of the child. So if you're doing it for yourself, you want to do it for your family as well.
Yeah, I know I've always shared with people when I was working as a practicing health educator. I used to tell people when one family member has a particular chronic health condition, don't single that person out and say, we have some salt-free soup over here for you. Prepare a meal that everybody can eat, Linda. And nowadays, there are so many there are not so many options, but when we eat out, for those who like to eat out, you can actually ask the restaurant, can you reduce certain items in your food if you're trying to watch your fat intake and or your salt? Because controlling your blood pressure is not just your sodium intake, right? Isn't it also about your fat intake? And either of you can answer that.
It is about fat intake, and where the fat plays a role is if you eat high fat, you will gain weight. And when you gain weight, your blood pressure will go up. So I like to think about the body as a closed system. So if you push on one part of the system, another part of the system is going to react to it. And it's just, I remember back when I started as a dietitian, and I was a consulting dietitian for Eartha White Nursing Home. And I know it has a new name now, but it was Eartha White. And the thing that I will never forget is on the third floor, there were 6 Black men under age 40 that were in the nursing home because they had had strokes from undiagnosed blood pressure. And all of them were depressed because they had the presence of mind to realize, I'm young and I'm in this nursing home with all of these older people. So that has just really stuck with me. And I've kind of been on a mission to help people eat better so that they don't have to go there.
So Dr. Foy, thank you, Linda. Dr. Foy, how early should folks start paying attention to their blood pressure?
Well, when young children go into the doctor's office, their blood pressure starts being checked usually when they're over 4 years old. And so we start monitoring whether or not children have elevations in their blood pressure, even that young. As stated earlier, we live in a country where our children are the most obese children in the world. And so when you have that, you actually start seeing grown-up conditions and grown-up diseases, even in as young as high school age or middle school age, depending on how obese they are, how poor their diet is, what their family history is. Those things can start really settling in early. Now, from the doctor's standpoint, if I have someone that young who is coming in and they have that pressure elevations, I'm going to look for other things. I'm going to make sure that their kidneys are working fine, that there's no blockages. Sometimes people who have sickle cell disease might have a blood clot or a blockage to their kidneys. Other types of conditions can cause it. So it's important for any doctor to look for things like that. So I say that so if parents are listening and they take their children in and the doctor has been saying, hey, their blood pressure is elevated, then they want to make sure that they're not just saying, okay, you're a little Black child who is likely to have some stuff wrong with them. So this is just high blood pressure because your mama and your grandma and your daddy got blood pressure. No, they need to make sure that nothing else is going on with that child. And even if I have people in their 20s, I usually am going to do an evaluation of their kidneys to make sure it's not something else if their blood pressures are significantly elevated. But we start checking blood pressures as young as 4, and we want to make sure that this is why going to the doctor at least once a year becomes important, so that at least one time a year it'll be checked. And then that gives you an opportunity and your doctor an opportunity to pay attention to it. One of the things that I have people come in and say a lot is, I came into the doctor because my head's been hurting, so I figured my pressure is up. And the reality is again, you called it early, it's a silent killer. So you may not, most of the time, you're not going to have symptoms because of high blood pressure. And most often, if you have a headache and your pressure is high, it's usually that the headache is causing your pressure to go up as opposed to the other way around. Your pressure usually has to be significantly elevated to be the cause of the headache. And so unfortunately, our bodies will oftentimes get used to elevations in blood pressure. So you're walking around 200 over 150 or 200 over 110, and you don't know it because you're not having any symptoms. So that takes us back to at least once a year, go see your primary care doctor so that your blood pressure can be checked, and you can make sure that at least during that time, things are stable. And we'll look at all your numbers so that we'll really be able to guide your health, but definitely checking that blood pressure is important.
And I always like to, thank you, Dr. Foy, I always remind people when I've had the chance to talk to them is, first of all, know your family history, because there are things that we cannot do about. We can't do anything about our age, race, family history, right? But there are things that we can do something about. And, you know, one of you touched on exercise, making sure you get enough physical activity, pull away from the TV after dinner and take a walk with the family. I like to ride my stationary bike first thing in the morning or 11 o'clock at night when I'm watching Family Feud with Steve Harvey, because see, I'm going to get a laugh and manage my stress level before I go to bed, or while I'm catching up on the morning news as I prepare for the day. So we have someone that said, what is the distinction between high blood pressure and hypertension? Are they treated the same?
So high blood pressure and hypertension are the same thing. That is just the medical terminology versus being able to help people understand exactly what it means to have hypertension, which is to have high blood pressure. So still a great question, because some people do think that it means something different, but no, if we tell you you have hypertension, that means your blood pressure is high.
So Linda, thank you, Dr. Ford. Linda, I have to get back to you, because some folks are preparing dinner right now, right? Or maybe they're eating good old soul food leftovers from Sunday.
Okay.
But let's talk about, and I know you had some information you wanted to share with us tonight. So, our behind the scenes guy, Tyrone, he's queued up. Tyrone, can you show that, and then we'll follow up with Linda.
Okay. So where this came from is there's some questions that my patients ask me a lot. And so there's one number that I just want to share with you, because sometimes people say we don't want to talk about ethnic differences. Well, I do want to talk about ethnic differences. If you look at any of the governmental guidelines for how much sodium you should have in a day, they say 2,300. If you are of African descent, that is too high. Your number is 1,500. The number for your kids is 1,500. So that's the number that you want to use as a guide. And if you're reading food labels, that can tell you, do I want to eat this food or not? So I picked out some foods that are ethnic that we like to eat. And so 3 slices of bacon, just 3, have 555 milligrams of sodium. So that means that with 3 slices of bacon, you would be 1/3 of the way to your sodium for the whole day. Then we have ham hocks. 1 serving, 780 milligrams. And so people say, well, I just use it to season the food. Well, when you put the ham hocks in the greens, the sodium is now in the greens. Then we have cubed ham. So I was actually thinking cubed ham would be less. Cubed ham is actually more. Then I have some clients say to me, well, I don't use pork anymore. I use smoked turkey. Okay. Whether it's a wing or a neck, we're ranging on the low end at 400 milligrams and on the high end at 900 milligrams. So that means that you are over halfway to your allotment for the whole day. And then I looked at just lunch meat, because I remember growing up, we had bologna and, all kinds of things on sandwiches. 2 slices of lunch meat, just 2, 420 milligrams of sodium. Then there's ramen noodles. And I understand, for economic reasons, ramen feeds a lot of people. But what I ask you to do is, if you are cooking ramen noodles, don't put the packet of seasonings in there. Put your own seasonings, because 1 serving of ramen noodles is 875 milligrams. And then we have fast food burgers, but I'm going to hold that because I have a separate slide on that. And then we have canned vegetables. So if you can, frozen vegetables are better, because the canned vegetables have a lot of sodium added. And even if you can rinse the vegetables, and that helps some, but it also gets rid of a lot of the nutrients as well. And so what I want to point out on this circle is that 21% of all the sodium eaten in a day is from sandwiches. So if you think about 2 slices of lunch meat is 420 milligrams, that's one of the sources. But here I wanted to look at restaurant food, and the American Heart Association actually, and there's a study done by Dr. Wu. But look at on the left-hand side, this is the regular menu. It ranges from 1,200 milligrams up to 3,000 milligrams. So that's enough sodium in one meal for 2 days. So if you think about a child having a similar requirement, an American meal on a children's menu, 1,800 milligrams. On an Asian food, 2,300. Chicken, that's the American favorite, chicken, 2,594. So what's my point? My point is, if you cook at home, you can control the amount of sodium that's in the food. So how do you do that? Now I have people say, well, I don't use table salt. I use Himalayan salt or kosher salt or rock salt or sea salt. It's still salt. Don't be fooled. You're still going to get sodium from it. So none of them are any better than others of them. And so what do? So I hope you've heard of the DASH eating plan. This is one of the most remarkable eating plans that we've ever come up with. And when it first came out, if you were not hypertensive and you follow the DASH eating plan, your blood pressure will go down. If you are hypertensive and you follow the DASH eating plan, your blood pressure goes down even more. So it has regular food, whole grains, vegetables, fruits, dairy, lean meats. But I want to point out something about the meat is 6 ounces, not in a meal, 6 ounces in a day, the whole day. So we're looking at basically 2 ounces per meal. Then we have the nuts and seeds. So you want to eat the nuts, get the ones from the produce section that are not fried in oil and rolled in salt. So you just want plain nuts. And the serving size is 7. 7 nuts. That's a serving. Then we have the fats and oils. And so 3 teaspoons a day. You need some fat, but it's not much. Then the sweets and the added sugars, I'm not going to totally ruin your life. So a couple of times a week. And then again, the maximum sodium is 1,500. So one of the things my clients say to me all the time is they say, well, I like my food seasoned. Okay. Usually when they say seasoned, they're talking about smoked meat. And it doesn't matter whether it's pork or whether it's turkey, it's smoked, which means they injected it. That's the definition. They injected it with sodium. So I love Mrs. Dash products because they have a bunch of different flavors. They actually have marinades for the meat. So you put the meat in a plastic bag, pour in the Mrs. Dash marinade, leave it overnight, and then it tenderizes it and it adds flavor. But Mrs. Dash products have no sodium at all. So if you want your food seasoned, Mrs. Dash is the way to go. And then you don't have to worry about your sodium intake because you will have reduced it. So those are all the questions that people usually ask me about eating to reduce sodium.
Wow, that was very thorough, Linda. And if you didn't get it tonight, how to reduce the sodium in your diet and even to have a good understanding of how many milligrams of sodium, because you're right. And even when Dr. Foy was talking about how the blood pressure numbers change, the numbers of how much sodium we should have also change. But we also have to recognize, as you both have pointed out, the numbers for African Americans are different than the numbers for others. And that is something important that we definitely need to know. So thank you so much, Linda.
Jocelyn?
Yes.
Hi, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say something about the sodium, because I do like to talk to my patients about it in a perspective that kind of changes it a little bit. Of course, that was an excellent presentation and talk about sodium. A lot of times, though, what we when we talk about sodium, we talk about the DASH diet, which is phenomenal. A part of the reason why the DASH diet works so well is because it is actually high in potassium. And so the potassium, and some studies have shown that when we are talking about high blood pressure, when we talk about the fact that the high potassium can help actually decrease the blood pressure even more so than the low sodium, and they end up going hand in hand. So I do want you guys out there to know, think about high potassium foods, and that's where you get lots of fruits and vegetables and grains. That's where it comes from. And so that's going to be an excellent source. Now, most of our people these days are readers. If they're here on with us, and we know they've Googled something. And so the idea that I want to make sure is, when you are trying to add potassium, you want to make sure you're adding it naturally, that it's the foods you eat and not just a supplement you take, because that can be a little bit more dangerous and tricky. You're not getting the fiber, you're not getting the nutrients, you're not getting all of that extra good stuff that comes along with eating those natural ways of getting potassium in. And potassium has a very, what we call, narrow window, which means it's easy to get too much really quickly if you're taking it in a supplement and not in the foods you eat. Your body does a better job at balancing it and controlling it when it's from the foods that you eat. So if you read something that says, oh yeah, you should have higher potassium, then it should be from food and nutrition, and not just go and pick up the pill, because that can sometimes make it too high, make your heart beat a little funny, make your muscles not work as well. And if you have kidney problems, you want to make sure that you actually don't do as much. You definitely don't do extra potassium supplements, but it's still important to eat lots of fruits and vegetables, but you have to be a little bit more cautious with it and talk to your doctor about how much you should be taking in. But both of those things can really help to decrease your blood pressure. So,
well, I left that off on purpose. I wanted the doctor to talk about the potassium. Thank you. But really, when you look, that there's two things with the DASH eating plan. The potassium is one, and you're getting it from fruits and vegetables. But the other thing is, it has dairy in there, and the calcium and the magnesium from the dairy and the nuts also reduce blood pressure.
Ms. Turner, let me just say this. Boy, these ladies make me look bad. They're so smart. Anyway, the thing that I just wanted to add something historically to it. That DASH plan was created by two Black women. They were smart as whip. I happen to know them back in the day when it first occurred. Many, you guys were still babies probably, but not to date the inventors of the DASH plan, but more than to date myself. Two Black women who really took the time out to study that whole potassium, sodium, magnesium, calcium, the whole interaction as far as it was in terms of how it related to Black folks, and in terms of keeping the blood pressure down. There, what we also, I just wanted to throw out another a fact is that when they were considering this, having spoke to them in the past, they really looked at the smoked meats and what it meant, and why was it that we're so enthused about smoked meats, and the historic background behind it, and that it came from the days in which you guys is still present, but the days in which this country was being built on the backs of black women whom had these babies that they needed to take care of and had to stretch foods to make sure that they could feed these babies. Thanks to, no thanks to, whichever way you want to look at it, the ongoing culture at that time. And so that, smoked meats was basically created because when we ever, post-slavery, I'm going to go post-slavery, when we had the black farms and so on and so on, we may have had that pig or cow, whatever we raised throughout the season. And when time came to kill it to feed the family, we had to preserve it. There was no refrigeration. So quite naturally, what we did to preserve it was to roll it up in salt, which prevented bacterial overgrowth, and then to put it in a smokehouse, which prevented insects and animals from going after it. That became part of our culture, which is what they related to me. And then because of that, it passed on from generation to generation. So that, in effect, I just wanted to present what they spoke to me about 20 years ago, 20 plus years.
Thank you, Dr. Kane, for dating yourself. I appreciate that. You're putting it out there. So, Dr. Foy, I want to ask you, other than managing my blood pressure with my sodium intake and exercising, what are some other ways that you treat blood pressure, or that we could manage our blood pressures?
Well, before we skip exercise, because I think we need to be a little bit specific about exercise, if you don't mind taking the liberty. Because people think, yes, diet and exercise, but sometimes we need to clarify what that means and what our directive is. So when it comes to exercise, I really want people to understand this, because this is one of the things people exercise a lot of times to lose weight. And so in their mind, if they are not losing weight, then they are not being successful with their exercise attempts. And I want to dismantle that understanding of what exercise is for them and the benefits of, specifically in relation to high blood pressure. When it comes to high blood pressure, exercise can be equivalent to taking a pill, which nobody really wants to take if we can avoid it. And so you have an opportunity to basically just go and do some physical activity to replace the notion that your doctor has to write a pill for you. Specifically, 30 to 45 minutes, five days a week, has been shown to decrease the blood pressure by 10 points. So that is a huge decrease in blood pressure if it is done consistently. And it doesn't have to be marathon running, Taibo, Zumba, things that are excessive, or things that take a lot out of you. It is a moderate walk for 30 to 45 minutes, 5 days a week, can help bring your pressure down by 10 points. It also doesn't have to be done all at the same time. So if you do 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, those activities can help to truly bring your blood pressure down. A part of that taps into some of the other things that can help with treating your blood pressure that are not medicinal. So exercising is a stress reliever, like you said. So minimizing the stress in your life, are finding positive ways to focus on the stress and to help to relieve stress helps to decrease your blood pressure. So for instance, exercise helps to relieve actually a drug in your brain, a good substance called these endorphins that actually works to calm you down, to relieve stress. And by doing so, it can help to decrease your blood pressure. And so finding positive ways to dismantle or minimize stress are going to help with your blood pressure. Now, being very clear, people think that their blood pressure only goes up if they're stressed. That is not the case. We've talked about salt, we've talked about age, we've talked about living. And so I have people who's like, I don't know why my pressure's high. I'm fine. My life is good. Because there are other things that cause it. Now, yes, it can go up when you're stressed, but there are many stresses. Driving in traffic is stressor, even if it doesn't feel like it. You become so used to some of these everyday things. So finding opportunities to actually de-stress is an important way to treat blood pressure. Deep breathing. So deep breathing outside of the context of relieving stress, because some people, it's like, I'm going to take a deep breath because I'm stressed out right now. No, deep breathing outside of that and just being intentional about doing breathing exercises has been shown to actually also decrease your blood pressure. And so being very intentional in moments where you can do that, leading up to meditation, leading up to yoga, or just leading up to, I'm getting ready to go to bed, let me do 5 minutes of breathing exercises. That can help to decrease your blood pressure. If you have something like sleep apnea, treating your sleep apnea appropriately, which is either losing weight, having your mouth guard, wearing mouth guards, having your mouth fixed to so the anatomy is right, or using whatever device your doctor gives you, whether it is a CPAP mask or a high flow oxygen or some variation of that. Treating sleep apnea can help to treat your blood pressure, because sometimes I'll have people who we have worked really hard, they're working on losing weight, they're doing the best they can, but for some reason their pressures are still staying high. And then I have to say, wait, are you using your CPAP? Have I done my due diligence to check you for sleep apnea? So talk to your doctor about checking you for sleep apnea, which signs can be that you feel tired all day, or that you're snoring loud, or your partner is like, hey, you look like you stopped breathing while you're sleeping. Those are signs of sleep apnea. So those are reasons to go to get checked, because untreated sleep apnea can keep your blood pressure elevated. So you want to make sure that that is treated appropriately.
I'm sorry. I wanted to ask, while you're also talking, Dr. Foy, what are the consequences of not controlling your blood pressure, of having, prolonged uncontrolled blood pressure?
Right. So the biggest consequence, of course, is death. and I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but that is a reality of it. But what happens more often than death is debility up to that. So the number one cause of death in our country is heart disease. So having years of uncontrolled high blood pressure causes damage inside the arteries to your organs. And so your main organ being your heart, so it leads to heart attacks, heart failure, and strokes. So when we talk about cardiovascular disease, we'll say heart disease sometimes and we think it's just the heart, but the blood vessels that are big and important go from your heart to your brain. And so these get blocked up and damaged really easy by elevations in your blood pressure and put you at risk for having a stroke. Strokes don't kill people most of the time. They cause disability, and they end up making you, be unable to move limbs and not be able to see, and really cause things that decrease your quality of life long term. So it's not just about, well, if I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. No, you are putting yourself more at risk of having this disability that will not only affect you, but affect your family and the people who have to take care of you. It affects finances, because if you're still alive and you've had a stroke, then one, you're not working, so you can't be productive sometimes if it's a bad stroke. And then, but someone has to keep taking care of you. It ends up putting families in financial hardship. It ends up really causing emotional types of stressors for people, for the person who has had the stroke and the person who has to take care of that person. I have, and not breaking HIPAA, but because this happens so many times, I have a family, for years I told this person to, hey, your blood pressure is terrible, please stop smoking. And when it gets to the point that I say your blood pressure is terrible in the office, because I pull that out when I really want to do that mama look, like, look, the pressure is terrible, I need you to do something now. And I do that sometimes, so if you're getting that from me, that you know that it's I ain't playing with you anymore. And so this gentleman, I told him over and over again for years and years, and I took care of him and his wife. Well, eventually, and he had little strokes, baby strokes. He was like, so at this point, he think he can handle it. Oh, strokes come and go. I'm not worried about it. Well, then he had a major stroke. And so he can't move anything but his neck and head. And he understands, but he can't talk about it. He can't do anything. And she's been taking care of him for the last 8 years now in this state, in this condition. And she's wonderful, bless her heart. But that is happening to too many families. And that could have been preventable because he wouldn't stop smoking. He wouldn't eat right. He wouldn't do any of the things that I encouraged him to do. So you are in control. You have the opportunity to help avoid some of those things. Dialysis. People think about, oh, I'll never want to be on dialysis. Well, high blood pressure is one of the major causes of end-stage kidney disease, which is what people have when they are on dialysis, which means their kidneys don't work. They can't get the poisons and toxins that build up in their body out normally, which they would do if they were able to urinate normally. And it builds up. So now you have to have a machine that filters your blood for you. Well, high blood pressure is what leads to that, uncontrolled high blood pressure. Because that's the thing I want people to understand. It's about control. It's about prevention. And you play the biggest role in treatment and prevention. And if you are going to the doctor and your doctor is allowing your blood pressure to stay elevated, or you go in and you got your checkup and they didn't even talk to you about it, then you need to bring it up, because as clinicians, sometimes we don't do a good job because we're trying to look at everything else. And we are like, it's not till you're gone, or they may not even realize your pressure was high that day. So force them to look at it and talk about it and think about it when you're there, so that it can be addressed properly. And if you need more medicine, if you're doing your part and there's nothing else that you can do, then that means some more medicine might be needed, or some supplement, or maybe we need to really see, there's more sodium in that than you realize. At least a conversation about how are we going to address this and how are we going to treat it, so that we can avoid those complications that arise from high blood pressure.
The only thing that I see with, one of the things that I say with those patients, that is very, very selfish when you sit back and you're not taking in consideration the impact of that, what this blood pressure is doing to your body, which then subsequently affect your family, as Dr. Johnson Foy just mentioned. You're laying back, this guy's laying back. I don't know him, so it's not a violation of any HIPAA. But he's laying back, and now this family's got to take care of him. And I think that's just very selfish when you sit back and run the risk that you do. If you get hit by a Mack truck, that's nothing you could do unless you stepped out there in front of it intentionally. But when you got high blood pressure, you get warning after warning after warning, and then you have a stroke. It just shows you how selfish you were in terms of not considering your family members, because they love you and they're going to take care of you, but you have put them in that position that they got to continue to take care of you. And I just don't think it's right. That I hope it never happens to me, because I don't want to say what I may or may not do, in terms of going along that line. But I just had to throw that out. Sorry.
So Linda, when folks start, maybe they've eaten dinner, so it's like, oh well, I just had the ham hocks and the greens, as was mentioned earlier. But if folks want to really start saying, okay, tomorrow I'm going to pay attention to how much sodium I get in a day, can you talk a little bit about reading the labels, or at least what foods to avoid that will make to help them navigate from eating sodium enriched foods?
Well, let's talk about those labels. The first thing you look at on a label is the serving size, and then how many servings in that container. Because what the food manufacturers did to try to trick people is like let's say a can of soda. For a long time, a can of soda was 2 servings. So it didn't look like it was as bad, but who drinks a half a can of a soda? So it's like that with a lot of packages. So the new food labels are much better. They'll say 1 serving is this. If you eat the whole container, there's a separate column. But the easiest way to look at this is you look at the total sodium, and if I've already told you that your limit is 1,500, if one item in the meal is 500, then that's too much. So you have a couple of choices. You could not eat it at all. You could eat 1/4 of a serving rather than a whole serving. But even larger than that is if you cook yourself, you can eliminate about 80% of the sodium. But if you eat from a box, anything that's in a box, a package, a can, if it crunches, if it's pretty, if it makes noise, it's high in sodium. And the thing is, 2 of my degrees are in food science. And what we learn how to do in food science is we learn how to formulate things so that people would eat themselves into oblivion. And so part of the experience, think about a bag of potato chips. Now, potato chips are not even in the food groups. They're not a food. But think about the experience of opening a bag of chips. The bag crunches, the bag is bright yellow, bright red, and then when you open it up, there's that puff of air that hits your nose. So you may say, I'm only going to eat 1. No, you're not. And that's scientific. It is scientific. So when I was a school food service director, we cooked from scratch. We cooked real food. We didn't do the Kraft macaroni and cheese in the box. And when we gave those kids macaroni and cheese from scratch and we made it with low-fat cheese, they didn't even know what it was. They had never seen home-cooked macaroni and cheese. So cook yourself. And one thing the food industry has done a really good job of is if you look in the freezer section, you can get individual servings of vegetables. You can get individual servings of brown rice already cooked with 0 sodium in it. So if you were to say grab a pre-cooked chicken from Tyson that has about 200 milligrams of sodium, grab a bag of rice, grab a couple of vegetables, say some broccoli and some squash, and then you get your Mrs. Dash, put your Mrs. Dash on there. You can have that whole meal and have under 300 milligrams of sodium. So it's doable. It's doable.
Wow.
And
They just
Jocelyn,
need biodegradable packages, but go ahead.
Jocelyn, one of the, just real quick to add on to that, one of my favorite ways to help people count their sodium or monitor their sodium is the same way. You know, people who are intentional about knowing what's going in their body by tracking tend to do better with nutrition and lifestyle changes in general. So I often tell patients to download the MyFitnessPal app, MyFitnessPal, and it calculates your sodium. So I will, even in people who may not feel like that they are focusing on weight loss just yet, I use it as a tool for my patients with hypertension to monitor their sodium. And so, it helps them. Now, of course, they end up actually redirecting and looking at their whole general health, but it actually is good at calculating sodium as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, this has been a very, very informative show. We've talked about so much. If you are struggling with your blood pressure, if you didn't get it tonight, then you definitely need to go and see Dr. Foy, Dr. Kane, or Linda Lockett Brown. because I promise you, one of them will help you get your blood pressure under control, as well as any other chronic health condition. We always like to end our show by allowing our guests to share their final thoughts regarding tonight's discussion. Linda, I'll go ahead and start with you. What final advice would you like to give our listeners?
My advice is, if you're of African descent, I love Dr. Foy's word, be intentional about it, and don't assume that just because it happened to your parents that it has to happen to you.
Thank you. And Dr. Foy?
And I'll just continue echo those thoughts that things are preventable, and exercise is medicine, food is medicine. And so you don't have to be given a pill in order to treat and conquer some of these things. But the key is to try to not get them in the first place. And so living your life in a way that is about prevention and healthy living can help you avoid a lot of these conditions that we enjoy talking to you about, but wish we didn't have to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you both so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. And Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts for tonight's show? Dr. Kane, you're muted.
Just to piggyback on what both our guests said, and that is, because it happened to your parents doesn't mean it have to happen to you. May have happened to your parents not because of genetics, but because of the parental habits. So if you change, you do a generational change in terms of your habits, then the outcome may be actually different. So they were right on the mark with that. And I very much appreciate both of these ladies. They're so smart. Sometimes I'm talking just to hear myself talk, I guess, because they've covered so much and they're so knowledgeable that I can much appreciate bringing them to the show. And trust me, you will see us again, ladies.
We know. Glad to come back.
Thank you.
Again, I'd just like to share my final thoughts regarding tonight's discussion, because one of the things we didn't talk about is growing your own garden. We talked about eating more fruits and vegetables. So don't forget, grow your own garden. If you don't know how to get started, reach out to your county extension office. They will assist you, because one of the things that you want to do is test your soil before you go outside and throw your seeds in the ground, because unfortunately, there may be some things you need to do to treat your soil before you start planting or growing your fruits and vegetables. We also didn't talk about drinking more water. You'll see me with my bottle of water. Don't forget that. And bottom line, know your family history. Focus on prevention. Exercise regularly. Dr. Foy talked about a minimum of 5 days a week for at least 30 to 45 minutes at a time. As a matter of fact, before I left the health department, we just said most days of the week you need to get some exercise in. My friends, when I tell them I'm exercising, it's like, oh, that's great. It's like, I don't do it because I enjoy it. I do it because I have to. I'm not one of those people who enjoy exercising. I do it out of necessity. Sorry, folks, if I offended you because you enjoy exercising. I'm not that girl. But we are here to pause for the truth and tell you about how to take better care of yourselves. Because one thing that we always like to stress is we want you to add quality to your life so that you will add quantity to your life. Stay tuned for next week's show as we end the month on women's health, because yes, it is Women's Health Month. And guess why it's Women's Health Month? It correlates with the fact that it was Mother's Day, right? And then next month will be Father's Day. So we'll talk about what? Men's health. Thank you as always for listening. Thanks to our guests. And you all have a good evening and stay healthy. Good night.
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 Yeah.